for downloading this episode of Cork Talk with me, Tim Atkin. A weekly conversation with some of the most famous people in the world of wine. Marco Ventrella ran restaurants and nightclubs as a young man, but switched to a very successful career in wine in his late 20s. Now established at the KWV as one of the best viticulturists in South Africa, he claims with considerable modesty that with each vintage, I feel I know less rather than more. He's a fascinating guide to the different climates and terroirs of the Western Cape, as well as the best way to farm them. Hello, Marco. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate the invite, and good to see you again.
Likewise. I mean, where are you? You're in South Africa. You're in Paarl, aren't you?
I'm in Paarl. I'm at home on my. I live in a workers' cottage, old workers' cottage on the Paarl Mountain on the north side. Just come back from a day at the beach. It's been a perfect day here, literally perfect.
Well, for once, I don't envy you because it's been a perfect day here as well as we go.
Look at that.
Exactly.
Matching weather.
Now, you are one of my favourite viticulturists because not only are you very good at your job, you're also opinionated and you're funny. So no challenge as we go into this podcast.
Thanks for the hospital part.
It'll be a lot of fun. Now, your name, Marco Ventrella. I mean, you know, Italian, right? How could you be anything else with a name like that? Tell us a bit more about the Ventrellas. I mean, where were you brought up? Were you brought up in the Cape? How long have the Ventrellas been there? Tell us a bit more about your folks.
Yeah, so both my father's Italian, my mother's South African. He came to South Africa, I think, in the sort of mid-60s. And both, he met my mother and married, but they're both restaurateurs, hoteliers. And he was sort of very formally trained, sommelier, maitre d' in Paris, you know, in the finest dining possible, and came to South Africa. I was born in Bloemfontein, which you'll know is dead center in the middle of the country and very far away from anything that resembles a vineyard. And 3 months later was in Venezuela, Caracas, spent 4 years there, then New York, then Montreal, then Valcom back in the Free State, because that makes perfect sense.
Wow.
So we moved a lot, and I spent time with my mom later because they divorced, and her speciality was training food and beverage staff, opening 5-star hotels for the Sun International Group and Southern Sun Group. So that's kind of what she moved to a new hotel that's opened the Sun, opened the Joburg Sun City Cabanas, did all the Royal Swazi, Legogo, Ezulwini Suns. So that was my life growing up.
Yeah, you were born into food and wine, really, and hospitality.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. I mean, in your 20s, I think you did a B-commerce degree and dropped out because you were bored. And then in your 20s, you ran nightclubs and restaurants. I presume you weren't doing them at the same time. It must have been a nightclub. You weren't doing it.
Look, nightclubs is a very young man's game, and it's an arduous ask on the body. You're sort of 20 hours a day and hopelessly too much alcohol. So you've got to be young, and it's short-lived. I think after that, restaurants, yes. We went back into, but I didn't know what to do. So I'd started studying, as you said, accounting, and I was good with the numbers, but I found it tedious. I didn't want to do that for a living. And it took me a really long time to get to a place where I figured out what I thought I wanted to do for a living, which was to be a winemaker.
Well, I just wonder what those years of dealing with the public, you know, first in nightclubs, then in restaurants, what did that teach you? Any tips you'd pass on? What's the best way of dealing with difficult people?
This is a public podcast, is it?
It
is. Anybody who works in the hospitality trade will know what that comment's about. But realistically, really, what it teaches you, if anything, it's empathy, hard work, teamwork. It teaches you you're not special. Right, you're not some kind of special thing because you've got to. You're a member of this team that's got to make this thing work. And if you fall down, the whole thing falls down. And that kind of chain responsibility and early responsibility and managing people are things that you don't easily get from university. You don't get that from study. You get something about your subject matter by all means, but at least to start, how to speak the language. But after that, you're kind of on your own. So that was hugely helpful, I thought.
Yeah, and in your late 20s, you decided to study winemaking and viticulture, didn't you? Elsenburg Agricultural College. Why then? And why wine, in a sense?
Well, so Elsenburg was a 3-year course, and University of Stellenbosch was a 4-year course. So it was a year faster, and it was more practical. Now, I was 29, I was older, and I didn't grow up on a wine farm. I didn't come from farming at all. I came from nightclubs, restaurants. I came from the inner city. I was not an outside person. I don't know a thing about a tractor or soil or anything really. So Elsenburg appealed to me from that point of view. I was going to learn the hands-on winemaking there, and I go and do that. But it required that I had to start working, go back to working as a waiter on the waterfront. Because it was full time during the day, and I already had my wife was with me. We had 4 cats and 4 dogs, and she wasn't working. And my people, don't have the proverbial pot or window. So things had to work at night and then study during the day, and that was how that went.
3 years, and you came top of your year
for 3 years. Yeah. Well, halfway through it, I realized I don't know, something happened. I became really fascinated by soil. I think soil and geology and soil science was something that really woke me up. And every old viticulturist that came to guest lecture or visit the college, when you ask them questions, and I had lots of questions, and their answers would be like, yeah, we don't know, we're not sure. Yes, it works like that sometimes. Okay, but when doesn't it work like that? Don't know. So they're really vague, really kind of non-committal answers. And I thought viticulturists had one sentence in their lives, which was, it depends. In Afrikaans, dit hang af. It depends. Every answer started with it depends. And young winemakers knew everything. Like 2 years out of college, they knew absolutely everything. And for me, that dichotomy, that sort of split told me that there was something different going on in the viticulture side. So I changed and pursued that. I mean, in the beginning, I thought it was grapes were a generic thing that came into the winery, and depending on how skilled and masterful the winemaker is and what wood they chose, you get different wines. And obviously it's not that. Yes, they must be skilled and choose correct wine, wood and all the other things that they've got to do. But the grapes are a very, very big part of that. Yeah.
And where you went on did a higher diploma in agriculture, didn't you? So you were so interested in it, and you were top of your year. So, you were suddenly starting to find this amazing passion. Had it been there all along in a way? Do you think you always like being outdoors as a kid?
No, well, no. I wasn't particularly, I was a night owl. I spent years and years sort of being like a vampire. Daylight hours were terrifying. It was I scuttled to a nightclub to open up and receive orders, just, and stay out of the sun. So this is a departure, a very big departure from what I was like. I just kept me interested. Honestly, Tim, I get bored easily. I always have. I had all the diagnoses growing up, they didn't have them then, but ADD and all this kind of thing. I'm incredibly bored very, very fast. And this kept me completely interested because I just couldn't get a handle on it. There was at no point that and frankly, to this day, at no point am I sure, have I ever been sure I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. It's that thing about it depends again, yeah?
It depends. And you have to, I think, assume the permanent position of student, of observer, of be teachable, and be prepared to change your mind or whatever you've decided and made up your mind on and said, this is how this bit works. I'm quite sure now. I've seen it work like that at least 4 or 5 times. Got to change.
Yeah.
When it's different.
How did you get the job at Graham Beck? Because that was your first job in the wine business. Big company, they were making bubbly, or they always made bubbly, still wines as well, I think, in those days, weren't they?
Yes, full range of wines. And at that point in time, they had the Franschhoek farm and 2 farms in Stellenbosch too. And look, they contacted the university and the college and asked for the top 4 students. They had a position as a technical assistant and assistant viticulturist. And I went along and got the job. Gary Baumgarten the general manager at the time, and Leon Dippenaar, the viticulturist at the time, both believed in me enough, and gave me both my start and enormous amount of mentorship and learning opportunity. And yeah, I'm very, very grateful for that. And it was a whirlwind, because, as I said earlier, at college you learn to speak the language, but that's it. After that, the learning really starts. It's just now that you're able to understand the language enough to start learning when you're working.
Tell me, I mean, are bubbly grapes and still wine grapes very different in terms of the way you farm them? I mean, obviously they're different in terms of when you pick them. You're going to pick bubbly grapes much earlier. Do they come from different places? Do you farm them in a different way?
You farm them very differently, for sure. So one of the major things you do differently is, I mean, the amount of light exposure that you're likely to offer. You remember that with bubbly, the bubble is a magnifying glass for lots of things, but among others, phenolics. And so anything bitter, anything harsh, that bubble is going to magnify. So where if I'm farming red wine, I'm doing a lot of light directly onto the bunches. I want color. I want structure. I'm looking for tannin. I'm looking for that whole polyphenolic complex. Whereas with Pinot Noir for MCC, I'm and especially if I'm in Robertson, I'm making sure there's a lot more cover around that. I want freshness, and I want a bit of that primary fruit, that raspberries, strawberries, but I don't want any of the sort of other complex stuff to go along with it.
Interesting. I mean, I think you spent 7 years there, didn't you? And then you joined the KWV?
Yeah. Yes, and then moved to KWV. It was 7 wonderful years. I learned an enormous amount. It really was. It was my training school, and I think I'll forever be grateful to the organization and all the people in it for all the opinities they gave me to learn. Yeah.
I mean, you've been at the KWV ever since. You know, you're a key part of the team there. Both big companies, you know, KWV, Graham Beck. I just wonder what the advantages and, if you can say, disadvantages are of working for a big company.
Well, I think the advantage certainly for me has been exposure. The multiple terroirs, multiple vineyards, multiple regions, multiple wine styles, understanding wine styles from really entry level, everyday drinking wine styles that are for a particular kind of consumer, and creating beautiful wines, but for that consumer, and then going all the way to the mentors wines, which are a whole different kettle of fish entirely.
Which is your top range, basically, the mentors range.
And now we're into fine wine, yeah. and we're looking at ageability and a whole host of things beyond, you know, primary fruit and things like that. So I think that for me, the ability to learn a lot more, again, that boredom factor for me, it's impossible to get bored. I think if there was a negative to it, I think it takes time to. You can't just do your own thing. You know, if you're in a really small place and you're the winemaker, viticulturist, and it's all kind of on you. It's your thought, your idea, your vision for the thing, and off you go, and you get to follow that line, however well or not. But in a bigger company, that's not the case. You're a steward, you're a caretaker. If I look at something like the Rudeberg brand, for example, has been going since 1949, sell it all over the world. And it's got a huge following. So how you work with that, it's not just a case of, well, I think we've got to go very carefully, very gently. If there are changes to be made, or there's always an evolution of styles and consumer, but you've got to do these things very, very mindfully as you go along, because you receive this thing. And you've got to hand it over to somebody else. You leave at some point, and the next generations have to continue. So you've got to leave it better than you found it, really. And so it's that kind of, you've got to be more mindful, I think, from the beginning. You don't just get to be you.
I like that. I mean, you like to call wine the greatest team sport ever.
It is.
And I must say, I always enjoy tasting with your team. And for some reason, Wines of South Africa always seems to put you on at 8 o'clock in the morning, which is a bit special when we finish off with a very nice Tawny 45. It always looks like you guys are having fun, right?
They like challenging you, Tim. They like challenging you, Tim.
You're making serious wines, but you're having fun. I mean, what makes that team successful, do you think? It's just that you all like each other? You seem to. Or maybe you're pretending for me. I don't know. But.
Well, no, we get on, but like any kind of family, we also have our days, there's no doubt about it. But we're humans. This is the thing. Yeah. But I think the key there is that we're all very passionate about what we're doing, and we're all very well aligned in terms of where we're trying to go with it. So even when we disagree and disagree quite vehemently, Iselle. Now her nickname is Quirky, which means little cross one, right? She certainly was that when I arrived. Things have changed. We've both mellowed with age, I think. But she and I could really get in each other's hair. But it's never personal. We're never coming at it from it's always because we're that passionate about the thing we're trying to do that we want it to be the best that it possibly can. And as long as you keep playing the ball and not the man, I think you get a good recipe. That said, I mean, and I don't want to seem sycophantic, but really the company has invested a lot of time and money and effort from board level down in leadership training and in displaying that kind of leadership and empowering people to run with the ball and to do that. And so that's what makes a great team, I think.
Tell us what your job entails, because obviously you're in the vineyards a lot, but at one point you were involved in buying wine, right? Are you still buying wine? Were you buying bulk wine? What were you doing exactly?
Yes, I had a team within a team. So yeah. I had what we call wet procurement, which is the procurement of grapes and the procurement of bulk wine and distilling wine and the wine for distillation and rebate for brandy. And so there's myself, then there's Ursula, who you've met, and she's viticulture. Yeah. And then I have Anneke du Plessis, who is the bulk wine and wine for distilling purchaser. And then we've got Charmaine, who's documents, contracts, making sure that we comply with absolutely everything, all the various different standards. So it's a team within a team. We're part of the wine team, the winemaking team, but it's another team. I keep saying it. It's the greatest team sport there is. Everybody has an opportunity to mess it up. I'm cleaning up my language here for wider use, but everyone does have an opportunity to mess it up, but also an opportunity to make it work. And if you do well, if you really do it well, you're like the horns and the woodwinds in the orchestra. You're part of the whole thing, and it goes, but nobody really notices you. They only really notice you when you play a bum note, Exactly. And then it's like, what the hell was that?
Especially if you're playing the tuba or something like that.
Yes.
And how much of your time do you actually spend in vineyards? I mean, it's pretty much all your time, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, a lot. I mean, I'd love to spend more, of course. We all don't, but we have admin and we've got things we've got to do. But I'm very grateful. I get to spend a lot of time in the vineyard, and it's where everything works for me. That's where my mind is allowed to work. I get to work with the growers and understand where they are. And it's a partnership that we have. We've got incredible growers, some of which have been delivering grapes to us. I'm on the third generation with some properties. So it's long-standing relationships.
And I mean, you're buying grapes from Vredendal to Plet or not? I mean, all over the Western Cape, down the Garden Route?
No, I don't buy from Vredendal anymore. But all of Swartland, Darling, Paul, Wellington, Stellenbosch, Bot River. So that's the grape side of thing. Oh, and some in the Bredekloof up in the mountains towards Ceres. And that's the grape side. And then, of course, the bulk wine side is the whole of the Bredekloof and the Robertson, Bonnievale, Ashton Valley.
Yeah. And just a little bit more about the growers. I mean, a lot of grower liaison is a big bit of your job, isn't it? I mean, no one could pretend that the Cape is not suffering. I mean, like many wineries at the moment. Is it tough being a grape grower right now? I mean, is it tougher than it's ever been in your time as a viticulturist?
Oh, it's tougher than it's ever been. I don't know about that. It was pretty brutal there in 2004. So, things have cycles. The industry has cycles, and like all industries, you have to just sort of prepare yourself for that. But it is difficult for grape growers. It's very certainly difficult for both grape growers and wineries and brand owners. The whole value chain has become difficult, and margin is being squeezed in all ways. So we've got to figure it out. It's a challenge. We've been here before. The wine industry has faced great challenges before. You just think about trying to get through phylloxera and then going through 2 world wars and then stepping into World War One and then getting to the end of that and having tariffs change on you.
Yeah.
Well,
and boycotts under apartheid, it was pretty tough for the industry.
Absolutely. And quite rightly, but still you had to live through it. So I think it is challenging. We as KWV understand that we don't have a business without our growers. I mean, our growers are a key part of what we do. So we've got to share the pain, share the glory, however you want to say that, but we work hand in hand with one another. To try and make sure that we can be as sustainable as we possibly can, financially as well as in every other way, and sort of weather the storm. But the reality is that vineyard area is reducing, as you know, and it's just doing so not just in South Africa but elsewhere in the world. And at some point that will hopefully balance supply and demand in such a way that it works for everybody. But of course, you don't teleport from here to there. You have to go through that, and there's always pain along the way.
Absolutely. You've got this amazing overview, of the whole of the Western Cape, basically, because you're buying grapes from all over and wines as well, as you said. Just for somebody who's never been there, and it is an unbelievable country, what are the kind of major climatic influences? Can you give us a couple of minutes just saying this is why the Cape is the way it is and why some of the major regions are so different?
Yeah, sure. Look, I mean, it feels strange telling you this. Some 20 years of visits to the Cape, I think, but I'll give it a go for the listeners. So essentially... No,
it's longer than that. It's actually 35.
35 years. Good grief.
Yeah.
But the Western Cape is really, really unique, I think, in the world, in so much as that we've got 2 oceans that are absolutely influencing everything there. We've got the Atlantic Ocean, in particular, that Benguela current that comes screaming up the west coast of Africa, comes out of Antarctica and runs up the west coast of Africa, makes that water unswimmable. I was ankle deep in that water today, and on a hot day, and it wasn't funny. But that really has a lot of influence. And then the Indian Ocean, which is warmer, but we're right at the end of the Indian Ocean, so it's not as though it's particularly warm. But these 2 oceans, with their currents and their mediating effect, have huge, and winds. We're a windy area. The Cape of Good Hope is about storms and winds, and we generate rainfall through cold fronts that winds keep generating through. So if you've got that in between these 2 oceans, these 2 influences with winds and storms, we have an enormous amount of topography in a really small area. All right. So the South America and Western Australia and all that, Gondwana land was 500 million years ago. And if we watch Discovery, the continents drift apart nice and gently and go and come to their current place. But that's the last 2 seconds of a 48-hour movie. These things have been coming apart and banging together again and coming apart and banging together and sliding around the whole globe. And so what that's done is it's created all this topography in a really small space. It's dramatic topography, which means that you can go 10 minutes from this side of this mountain to that side of this mountain and have completely different rainfall, completely different winds, completely different temperature sets. So it's not homogeneous. The soils, of course, are absolutely not homogeneous, not even vaguely. I remember, as a side note, standing in a vineyard with a French viticulturist, doctor of viticulture, in a vineyard in Robertson back then. The Ridge Syrah was this Shiraz vineyard. And he was explaining the complexities of Bordeaux and the 5 soils. And I said, 5 soils? He said, Bordeaux. And I'm going, Bordeaux, like you're talking 65,000 hectares, Bordeaux, 5 soils. So this is 2 hectares. It's got 13 soils in it. I want your problems. So the complexity of the Western Cape is its beauty, is its absolute grandeur, is this in a different wine every almost 100 meters on any given farm, even if you're farming the same variety on the same rootstock. That's the exciting part. That's the wondrous bit of it. The difficult part is that doesn't make for an easy sell on, if you ask me, well, Marco, how should I describe South African Chenin Blanc? And you want like, 4 descriptors that tells you what South African Chenin Blanc is, the way I could possibly give it to you for New Zealand Sauvignon.
Well, it's probably 2 for New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc.
Exactly, So that complexity makes life difficult. So we end up with diversities in our nature, and it is. But it's a journey of discovery, I think, South Africa.
Well, I think that's brilliantly put, I must say. But thank you for doing it so succinctly. One of your quotes, and you're very quotable, as people will realise, you describe viticulture as being like playing 7 games of chess at the same time. Is that part of the "it depends" that you learned from those growers years ago when you were at Elsenburg?
Absolutely. Look, I mean, you've got all these variables, and it's variables in the soil, variables in the climate in terms of that, and then weather that's happening in a given season. And so you have a set of conditions, and you've got a choice to make now: jump left or jump right. And you go, well, great, let's jump. I think jump left, and you jump left, and that kind of works, but doesn't really. And you say to yourself, I should have jumped right. Okay, your next chance to do that is at very earliest a year away. You don't get to come to the office again tomorrow and jump right. That option is gone now. For this season on that vineyard, you've made that choice. So you've got to wait until next year. Next year rolls around and you don't have those conditions again. You've got a completely different set of things. It's 5 years before you see vaguely the same conditions. And you must remember, listen, last time I went left, I want to go right this time. And you go right, and it's a disaster. And you go, oh, bugger, that was really not. And so this is my point. You're playing 7 games of chess on 7 boards. You can only see half of them. Every move affects every other board. Go. So you're constantly having to sort of I'm reminded of the Garmin tracker thing we had in the car in Italy when I was there, and the thing kept going ricalculo. And so this is viticulture. It's a constant state of ricalculo.
I mean, I love your line that you said, with each vintage, I feel I know less rather than more. Just quickly tell us about the last few vintages. I mean, the Cape came out of this long 5-year drought, didn't it? And then the last few years have been a bit more up and down, really, haven't they? I mean, is that climate chaos that's making its presence felt, do you think?
Well, climate change is definitely making its presence felt. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I think, anybody who works outside and who works with nature understand that it's more drastic weather. It's not a simple thing like it's warming up. No, it's more drastic weather, more extreme, and what we've seen in the last few years. We go from a long drought, a really quite long, prolonged drought due to El Nino, and then we have after that sort of wet vintages and rainfall. 2023, rainfall quite through, so loads of challenges with that. 25 this year was almost picture perfect.
But everybody's saying that 25 is going to be,
well, and every time I say that, all my winemakers take out their pots and pans and want to hit me over the head. And I say, oh, guys, well, I'm not promising it's going to be a wonderful vintage, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. It just went really smoothly. We had a warmer by degree days season, which also means it's buggy. It's like, the bugs go through extra breeding cycles. But besides that, the evenings were cooler. And so we had really a very mild, very, very mild season. I keep saying, beige is a color. And in wine, that's actually a good thing. We don't want drama.
Yeah,
we're not. Drama makes for wonderful copy and a lovely story to tell. But truly, we're not after drama. We want it to be nice and smooth. The ripening must be nice and easy. The vines must get to the grapes must get ripe evenly, beautifully, and come off and have good acidity and so on. And for the most part, that was the case.
That's good, yeah.
pH has changed a bit in the winery, and I'd be at a loss to tell you what's at play there. Other than I think perhaps malic tartaric balances were a bit, affected, but I think it was a pretty smart vintage.
I'm just generalizing, but recent vintages, the odd ones have been better. I mean, not 23 so much, but 15, 17, 21, 25, 19. Pretty decent too, I think. Probably the least good of those five. But,
but again, because it was wet, right? So 19 had an element of wetness to it. So that if, everything you got off before the rain was okay, but once those rains start rolling around, you were a little bit at the mercy, and you had to kind of make compromised decisions.
Yeah.
But yes, the odd ones, for the life of me, I've tried to look at it and figure it out and guess it and write my prediction on an envelope in an envelope and take it out in December and take it out after vintage. I haven't gotten any better at it. It's a mugs game. I think a 50% coin flip would do better. The only thing you can do is change. I think that's part of what's so wonderful about this team is we're all very change fit. We're used to going, look, your expectations are wonderful, but expectations are premeditated resentments, right? So when it doesn't happen like that, you're immediately upset, and you got to go through this whole emotional thing about why your expectation didn't work out, and it's a waste of energy and time. And in the meantime, you're not actually accepting reality, and that's what we've got to do: is accept reality. Where's the ball? Play the ball as it lies, and go, well, this is the reality of it, and I've got to work from here. And this team of winemakers that we have and our growers are exceptionally good at that. They've been this sort of trial of fire, the drought and the rain and the this and the that and COVID, good grief. All of that has made everybody...
I've forgotten about that.
Oh, geez, I wish I could.
No, exactly. Tell me something about farming, how you like to farm. Sustainable, regenerative, organic, biodynamic, conventional, I suppose, if that's the right term. How many of these are applicable to the Cape, and are they all equally suitable to the Cape, particularly with this changing climate?
Yeah, look, I think sustainable is what we do. We're wall to wall sustainable. We work with the IPW system. And so that's both sustainability, but that's the whole big picture, right? So it's a really big picture that goes, well, from the decision to plant there, was that the correct decision, through to biodiversity protection and all of those kinds of things, alien removal, all of that. I think conventional, the way it's meant, when we say conventional, is a sort of more a old broadacre farming kind of feeling, that kill them all, let God sort it out. Now, I don't know a single grower that could stomach that, and we don't have any that look like.
What you mean, using Roundup and stuff like that? Or? Well,
no, they just sort of kill everything. They're just really about chemicals, and it's not where we are. If you need to use fungicides, and if you need to use even herbicides, then you do so very carefully and correctly and appropriately. So part of the problem that we have in the Western Cape is that we've got these incredibly old soils. I mean, really, really, really old soils. They range sort of 500 million years to 1 billion years old, and in between there. I mean, some of the stuff in Robertson is maybe 350 million years old. That sort of those limestone, red Karoo limestone soils. But otherwise, it's close to 500 to 1 billion year old. Europe, 5 to 10 million years old. So our stuff is exceptionally old in a very, very advanced state of weathering with exceptionally fragile structure to our soil, which means that any kind of tillage is destructive. The moment you scratch in the soil in the Western Cape, you've begun a process of destroying structure. So if we talk about weed control, which is one of the big issues, well, if you're just using mechanics to weed control, you're going to destroy that soil. You're going to deflocculate the clay, create crust formation, issues with oxygen exchange, water infiltration. You're really killing it. You're killing everything. So you can't do that. Right? So, well, then what do? Do we just spray it all dead? Well, no, that's also not the option. So you've got to try and keep it covered. We're doing cover crops, all of this kind of stuff. Regenerative, I really, really like, and there's a lot more of that happening in the Western Cape now as well, precisely because it doesn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think regenerative is sort of a more of an inclusive a view of things to say, look, we need to keep the soil covered, but we need to be able to deal with with weeds, and we need to be able to get fertilizer in. These old soils don't hold water, don't hold food. We've got a carbon percentage that's typically under 2%, normally around 0.5% of carbon in the soil. Europe is at 5%. At 2.5%, I don't need to fertilize anymore. But if I'm at 0.5%, I've got to do something. So it's a different kind of problem that we've got to deal with. So the two main issues for me with straight up organic, when I say organic, I mean certification rather than principles. The principles of organic are entrenched inside the IPW system, inside our sustainable way of doing things, and which is why I think a lot of us are looking towards regen. But we've got to find the two problems are how to deal with weeds and how to deal with nutrition. We have to get nutrition in, so otherwise the growth falls. And with that growth fall, you end up losing 30% of your yield, and you're not getting 30% more for your grapes. But actually, the problem is it costs 20% more. So you need 100% more, to make that thing work. And who's paying double price for certified organic? And unfortunately, that has been the downfall of a number of businesses. I've seen a number in my time go. And I'm not saying you can't do organic in the Western Cape. There are those that can and do, and God bless them. But I think as a big generalization, I think definitely sustainable is what we're busy with in the wine industry, getting tighter and tighter every year, adding more and more. The IPW system now has carbon and carbon calculation brought into the thing. So I think that's very, very good. We've got a system there that it's the most rigorous in the world. I mean, there was a Chilean student out of Australia working for Ari that did a study of all of these systems and came back and said, look, the IPW in South Africa is the most arduous and complete of all of them in the world. So it's really, really all encompassing. And I think we just need to keep taking the next step to say, well, how do we do this better? How do we have less of an impact, of an imprint? Interesting, Tim, I saw and I couldn't quote it for you now, but I mean, I could find it eventually if I had to. I saw a study that was looking at insect life, biodiversity and number, right? So number of different insects, arthropods and things, and the diversity of species and number. And so these entomologists, insect folk were let loose in organic vineyards, a number of organic vineyards in the Western Cape, and a number of IPW sustainable vineyards in the Western Cape. And the result came back that there was no significant difference between the two. Now, that's a wonderful, I think, shot in the arm for the system to say, look, if we've got the same bugs and the same number and the same,
you're doing something right.
Exactly. I think there's so many interesting things that we're learning the whole time about the importance of the mycelial network in the soil. I mean, if you read Merlin Sheldrake's book, if you haven't, I do recommend it.
I have read it. It's a very good book. Yeah.
And so there's so much more. We're learning more and more that terroir has this huge biological arm to it that is as important, if not more, who knows, than the abiotic one, than the sort of pure, oh, this is the geology, that's the slope, and this is the climate. And it depends. It's complex.
Yeah, well, I like the it depends. I'm going to use that myself. They always say that in Galicia as well. Whenever you say to what's the vintage been like? What's life like? It depends. Anyway, final question is: how do you get away from wine? Are you still an Italian at heart? Still go to nightclubs? Probably a bit old for that now, even you.
Yeah,
right?
No. Look, my nightclubbing days are long gone. So no, I'm not that footloose and fancy free. I adore music. I adore food, which by the one look at me can tell you that. So I love to cook. I love to read. I read 3 or 4, 5 books at the same time, and not in one. It just so that I can bounce around between them, because if I get bored, the moment I'm rereading Plato, and I'm reminded again that it was a good thing. I understand why they killed Aristotle. Socrates rather. Why they murdered because he is a pain. Socrates, his method is wonderful, but good Lord. So nonetheless, I like reading, I like cooking, I like food. I love the performing arts of all kinds. So music, film, series. One day, I keep telling myself one day is one day, and one day I will put pen to paper. But at this point, I'm still following the advice of Bukowski on that one. Don't do it.
Don't do what? Don't write anything.
Yeah, don't do it. Not unless it drives you to murder, and you couldn't do otherwise. But perhaps one day soon.
Oh, well, I'd read it anyway. Listen, Mark, it's been brilliant talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your passion, amazing knowledge. We could have talked for another hour and a half about half of this stuff, but anyway, it's been brilliant to see you. See you soon, my friend. As ever, a great pleasure chatting to you.
Thank you so much, Tim. Lovely chatting to you. Cheers, mate.
Marco is so quotable, isn't he? I love the idea that beige is a legitimate colour and that growers are caretakers and stewards of the land. Next week on Cork Talk, my guest is Master of Wine Sam Capehorn, author of the Wine Flavour Guide. Join me then. Thanks for listening to Cork Talk. If you want to read more reports, articles and tasting notes by me, go to my website, timatkin.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @TimAtkin and on Instagram @TimAtkinMW. See you next week.